Albert Breer, Sports Illustrated, is talking about how the Falcons may make a run for Deebo. There was talk last week about the Steelers, and Omar Khan is still very interested in making a run at a big receiver, whether it be T. Higgins or one of the Niner receivers. What is your belief? The Niners do save an awful lot of money if they move Deebo after June 1st. Do you think it's going to happen, or do you think Deebo, Aiyuk, Jennings, they're here for the year, and any adjustment they make at this position is going to be done next year, maybe next March?
Careful, Larry. We talk about this. We enter the lion's den on social media. People will come after our heads.
I know. But, it is interesting. I mean, it's like the Niners could easily just be like very definitive and be like, hey, you know what? These guys, we did talk to teams. These guys potentially were available, but we've now decided that we are going forward this season and they will not be traded, and these guys will be on the roster. But they have always stopped short of that kind of guarantee, which would squelch all of this talk. At the same time, I think you and I are not naive, and we have to acknowledge the fact that, the NFL is king, and the NFL rumor mill, feeds all these NFL live shows and NFL network shows. And, they got to have something to talk about between now and training camp. And it seems like, who's going to trade for T. Higgins? What's going to happen with the Niner wide receivers? That's clearly a subplot. Where do you think they are? I mean, they haven't definitively said, but they've given indications that Aiyuk and Deebo are going to be here and they're going to deal with this in the future. But are they?
Yeah, it's interesting because last offseason, when we were in a similar era or stage with Nick Bosa, John Lynch came out multiple times. We are not trading Nick Bosa. Hasn't done that with Brandon Aiyuk. Hasn't done that with Deebo Samuel, which has fueled some of the speculation. So don't come at us. Come at the general manager for the football team and your head coach who won't turn down these trade rumors. John Lynch even said, we're taking calls on these players. And night 2 of the draft, he said, we're not taking any calls for these players, and we plan on moving forward with this receiver room that we're happy about. Look, I've said it all along, and I said this right after the Super Bowl. I think that the 2024 season is going to be the quote-unquote last dance for this core group of the San Francisco 49ers. I think in the 2025 offseason, after the Niners this offseason moved off of Eric Armstead, another core member of their organization, they're going to move off of potentially a Deebo Samuel, a George Kittle, a Kyle Juszczyk. They're going to have to. These players are getting a little bit older. They're getting increasingly expensive, and you have to replenish the cupboard to a certain degree with some of these young players. Think about some of the players that are going to be up for new deals. Brock Purdy, Brandon Aiyuk, Diamador Lenore, Charvarius Ward. These are really good players here. Do you want to give a contract extension to Fred Warner? That could be in play because he's still playing at a very elite level. And if you want to make those financial decisions, you have to look elsewhere on the team. Okay, Eric Armstead, Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee, has been with this team, longest tenured Niner since Trent Baalke, the final pick of Baalke's era. He's played at a really high level. He's from Sacramento. He's a team captain. But we get a player, Malik Collins, who's half the price, been more productive, more available the last 2 years. Those are the types of decisions that you have to make. Now, I think in 2024, the Niners, with Brock Purdy still being on his rookie deal, it's smart for them to run it back. And I think that's what they're going to do. And I think they're going to have Aiyuk, and I think at some point they're going to get a deal done. They're going to have Deebo, Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, and in turn, that's one of the deepest wide receiver rooms in the entire NFL. You see how this year goes. Ideally, you win the Super Bowl because you're still probably the most talented roster in the NFL. And next offseason, is that the offseason in which you reset a little bit and move off of a Deebo? Now, post June 1, if you move off Deebo, you free up like $21 million, and you only inherit a $6 million dead cap charge. That's interesting. And post June 1 is when you get the $18 million from the Eric Armstead deal after you released him. And could you use that money for an Aiyuk extension? Could you use that money for a Diamador Lenore extension? Do you want to lock up Aaron Banks? So I think all of these things are in play as we move forward.
What do you think is the move still to be done? Is the team as we see it going to be the team that takes the field, or do they have another move or two in them? Where's the biggest need coming out of the draft in your mind?
I think backup tight end is definitely an issue. You didn't address that in the draft, and now Cam Latu and Braden Willis are your backup tight ends. You're just not good enough at that position, especially with George Kittle getting a little bit older, highly productive in 2023. He was the best tight end in the NFL. That's why he was a first-team All-Pro. But he's getting older, and he has an injury history. So backup tight end, I think, is a problem on this team. You also did not draft a single defensive lineman. I still think you're a little bit thin at the backup defensive tackle spot. You could have used another edge rusher. So I look at that position as one to bulk up on. I actually think the Niners have maybe the deepest cornerback room that they've had under Shanahan and Lynch, with all of the players that they brought in free agency and then adding to it with Renardo Green. At the safety position, you got to think about how Talanoa Hufanga comes off the torn ACL. I like what Jair Brown did as a rookie. But if you want some more depth, do you look at a player like Justin Simmons, who is a 4-time All-Pro player who would be an upgrade over to Sean Gibson, who was very serviceable and very solid the last 2 years? But do you look at a player like that in the Super Bowl window and you try to bring in a veteran there? Outside of that, you're pretty deep at every other position. You're good at quarterback. After the draft, you're fine at running back. Wide receiver room, you're extremely deep. Offensive line, again, I would have loved to have seen some competition brought in for Colton McKivitz. What is the plan there? I'm not sure the Niners have one. They seem to be okay with McKivitz at right tackle. I disagree. He gave up 45 pressures and 11 sacks last year, but whatever. Tight end backup, like I said, that you need to bulk up there. And then linebacker, I'm kind of a believer in Jalen Graham and D. Winters. And going back to, I just think they have the speed that the Niners really like at the linebacker spot. Tatum Bethune is kind of a dog, too.
Yeah, we didn't talk about him. I mean, we should talk about him for a second, too, because, I mean, the thing about the Niners, Chase, and you know this, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but, I mean, you got to kind of give every single guy that they sign, whether it be an undrafted free agent or day 3 pick, and you got to really do your due diligence on all these guys, because history tells us that they hit on these guys.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed when I watched the Bethune tape, just how athletic he is. I think he might be a guy who steps in and makes the team. I mean, which is going to be hard to do because it's a pretty deep linebacking core, but without Greenlaw, Bethune is definitely an athlete for sure. And he's got college production.
Yeah. I like the way that he plays, and the Niners do like linebackers who kind of have a defensive background because they look at that athletic profile. And if they add a little bit of weight, you have the speed, you have the instincts to make that transition, especially against the pass game, because you kind of think about the game and process it from a defensive background. And for Tatum Bethune, he's a smaller player with the defensive back safety type of build. He's only 5'11", 229 pounds. An issue for why he fell so late, he ran a 4.75 at that weight. So that's a little bit slow, but physicality, instincts. And I think that if you add a little bit of weight to him, and could he trim down the speed, or do the instincts make up for the lack of speed in a Talanoa Hufanga type of way, he'll layer the boom and he'll pop pads. And it's pretty impressive the way that he plays, kind of like with that Dre Greenlaw type of attitude.
We mentioned tight end. I loved Mason Pline, and I've been talking about Mason Pline for a couple months, and I think that's a great sleeper pick. We're going to find out. I would still try to find, if I could find a Robert Tonyan or something like that, some other veteran tight end, just because I don't know if I believe in Braden Willis and Cam Latu, especially after last summer. But I do love this kid Pline. I don't know if you've done a deep dive on him, but 10.5-inch hands, a mechanical engineering major, former basketball player, 6'7" in that range. Guy Haberman did an interview with his college coach, who said, "Hey, this kid's not soft; he'll block." The athleticism is clear when you watch his basketball highlights. I think they may have found something there in Pline. He's a receiving tight end. There's obviously a need there, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if this undrafted free agent tight end makes the roster.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I did a 49ers 53-man roster projection following the NFL draft. And I had them keeping 4 tight ends because last year they kept 4 tight ends. I think Cam Lattu's on the hot seat. If you let go of Braden Willis, I don't think it hurts you. I had Mason Pline making the team as that developmental tight end. You lose Charlie Warner, you lose Ross Dwelly, and after George Kittle, you don't really have a proven tight end. So the backup number 2 tight end role, as far as pass catching and blocking goes, I think is going to be a really good competition. And elsewhere on this roster, the other positions I couldn't really figure out. Along the offensive line, do you get rid of do you cut a Nick Zakel and a Ben Barch for some of the interior offensive linemen that you drafted? Cornerback is going to be a stealthy competition. And I think that you're going to have to make some difficult decisions there. But for Pline, started his college career playing for Ferris State. And I think that that's pretty clear with the way that he plays, just approaching jump balls, the light feet, going up to get it. Really good size, 6'6", 251, ran a 4.79 40-yard dash. He's definitely green and a little bit raw as a blocker and the nuances of playing football, but he made a pretty good switch to playing college football. He transfers to Furman, led the team in receiving touchdowns. So that's pretty impressive to be able to do after being at Ferris State and starting off as a basketball player. Light hands. I think that he has a lot of potential, and that's one of the sleepers that I could see cracking the 53-man roster once roster cutdown day comes.
Couple more for Chase Sr. as he's with us on a Friday in his regular spot. We're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. Check them out along the Monterey Peninsula as well. Thanks for both of them sponsoring the Krug Show. Okay, I've been talking up Tanner Mordecai, and I watched some, according to Lynch, Brian Greasy really pounded the table along with Steve Slowick for Brock Purdy.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the feeling that maybe Brian Greasy pounded the table a little bit for Tanner Mordecai. I really loved what I saw. Now, I talked to Todd Husak last night, who's a former quarterback in college and briefly in the NFL. He doesn't love the motion. He thinks it's a little loopy and needs to be corrected.
Okay.
What I see is a smart, tough, competitive guy who's got a ton of experience, who's got 4.46 speed, who's got plenty of arm strength, who's tough, who played hurt against LSU in the ReliaQuest Bowl and threw for nearly 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. He plays with confidence. He's pretty accurate in a short area. To me, he's a leader. He's an authentic guy. He's kind of like Brock. He's a little undersized. He's 6'1", maybe 220. 163 10-yard split, not quite as good as Brock's 154, but I mean the lower body explosiveness, 36.5-inch vertical, 4.45 speed or 4.46. He started at Oklahoma, 12 games in 3 years, sat behind Kyler, lost out to Jalen Hurts, shared time with Spencer Rattler, then transferred to SMU. And, 7 touchdowns against Abilene Christian in his first start, 9 touchdowns against the University of Houston, put up some big numbers the last couple of years, 32 touchdowns, 10 picks, 39 touchdowns, 12 picks, had 9 touchdowns and 4 picks this year at Wisconsin. I think he's something, man. I think he's going to compete with Brandon Allen for that number 3 quarterback spot. I know it's going to take a big effort to get Allen out of there because Kyle loves Allen, but man, this kid has got something. Broke his right hand against Iowa, and then 3.5 weeks later, he's playing the bowl game, and the coach said, "Hey, what I loved the most is it was like never a question whether he was going to play the bowl game. He was like always going to play." Didn't get invited to the combine. One of the scouting reports says he's got a cannon. I don't know if I saw a cannon, Chase, but I saw definitely better arm strength than Brock Purdy. And 4.46 speed and courageousness. Like when this guy takes off and runs, he's running down the middle of the field. He's cutting and juking and making athletic plays. A buddy of mine who has been there on campus, not at Wisconsin, but scouted him when he was at SMU, said that, this kid had, really laid it out there nicely for Rashee Rice. And all the people in the SMU program thought he was a true, authentic leader and a very humble guy. There's a lot to like with Tanner Mordecai. Have you watched him at all?
Yeah, I was very familiar with his game in college, and he was a 4-star recruit out of Waco, Texas. As you said, he goes to Oklahoma, and he can't beat out Jalen Hurts or Spencer Rattler. But he goes to SMU, and he had great production in 2021 and in 2022. 2021, he threw for 3,600 yards, 39 touchdowns, and 12 picks. And then the year after that, 33 touchdowns and 10 picks. He goes to Wisconsin. He plays in 10 games, but it was kind of a disastrous season for Wisconsin in 2023. Never really found a groove and didn't probably play as much as he was anticipating. But when you watch him, strong arm, he'll push the ball downfield. I think where Purdy has him beat is with timing, accuracy, anticipation, and processing. And then some of the underneath throws, while Mordecai has a stronger arm and he'll push the ball downfield, not afraid to chuck it, sometimes he will miss some layups and gimmies. And maybe that has to do with the arm motion being a little bit sloppy. But he has a very similar build to Brock Purdy. Both are very, very close as far as their height and weight goes. I'd say Mordecai might be a little bit faster as far as the 40-yard dash speed, but we know that Purdy really has some of that short area quickness and the Tony Romo ability to kind of twirl out of the pocket when he has a rusher on his backside or just maneuver within the pocket to make plays out of structure and improvisationally. I think that's just a special ability that Purdy has. But another constant with Mordecai and Purdy, they played a lot of college football. They're very experienced on top of all of the other similarities that I just talked about. And he's played at a high level for some really good programs. Don't tell me that SMU stinks. SMU has been a very solid team playing in a good, non-Power 5 conference in the American Athletic Conference. And for us as people who love the game, scout the game, content creators, broadcasters, whatever you want to call us these days, it's always fluid and changing as far as the terminology. I'm excited to see what a player like this can do as a UDFA and what Brian Greasy and Kyle Shanahan are going to be able to do as far as their development of the young quarterback with skills. Clean up the mechanics a little bit in the preseason, give him some runway, play in the third and fourth quarter. That's when we kind of saw something from Brock Purdy, you and I, where we're like, this guy has something to him. And when you watch Tanner Mordecai, he certainly has that ability. And the Niners gave Josh Dobbs a little less than $3 million in guaranteed money, solid backup money. They gave Brandon Allen a 1-year deal worth $1 million. So they're not tied to him at all. I know he was the backup for Joe Burrow, very well respected within that room. I think he can be a coach at some point down the road, but he doesn't have the arm strength of Mordecai, the running ability, the athleticism, and the upside as a young player like Mordecai does. So that QB3 battle, I'm really looking forward to that. And I know you are as well, because you'll be on that sideline at the SCP Performance Center.